This is George Weyerhaeuser, an heir to a lumber fortune. In 1935, he was walking home from school in Tacoma's North End when he was abducted by two men. George's disappearance spanned across the state. He was chained to a tree, trapped underground, and then locked in a closet here in Spokane. George's disappearance led to an urgent search to bring him home and made the front page of newspapers across the country. Headlines from coast to coast, a child kidnapped in broad daylight.
Well, in 1935, 9-year-old George Weyerhauser is walking home from school, and he's snatched right off the street, about 3 blocks from his house.
School was released early that day in Tacoma. George was supposed to meet his sister at Annie Wright Seminary, but decided to walk home instead. But that's where things went terribly wrong. Seattle author Brian Johnston is releasing a new book called Deep in the Woods, documenting what the New York Times called the greatest manhunt in the history of the Northwest.
Back in the 30s, kidnapping was becoming really popular with the criminal set. And so rich families had to be concerned about something like this.
The Weyerhauser family owns more timber than you can possibly imagine, making them a prime target for the kidnappers. George's family contacted police the day of his disappearance. Not long after, they received a ransom letter in the mail demanding $200,000 and their son's signature on the back. This was just the beginning of an elaborate plan by the kidnappers.
And they told the family would communicate with the kidnappers using personal ads in the Seattle Post-Intelligencer newspaper. And they would use a code name, Percy Minnie.
The kidnappers kept the Weyerhausers busy with an elaborate series of instructions to deliver the ransom. But as for George,
I was chained out in the woods. Didn't occur to me that I was in jeopardy.
That's the voice of George Weyerhauser, now 96 years old. Brian was able to track him down 85 years after the kidnapping.
And he was engaging, he was funny, he was still pretty sharp. He still remembered an awful lot about it.
To avoid detection, the kidnappers transported George all over the state. He was chained up and put in a hole in the ground in Enumclaw and then brought all the way to eastern Washington.
They got him there at the house in Spokane, and they kept him locked in a closet for 5 days.
For such a heinous crime, more than 8 decades later, George doesn't feel like it had a major impact on his life because some kidnappings don't have a happy ending.
I consider it to be a novelty and a dangerous occupation to be involved in, but you know, it had a wrap-up that was all's well that ends well.
While researching the story, Johnston combed through 2,500 pages of FBI documents and more than 200 newspaper articles.
I want to ask you, what piqued your interest in this case and this story? Why write a book on this?
Some people are aware of the Weyerhauser kidnapping, but most people aren't. And those who do know about it have no clue how fascinating and how deep this story runs.
So the story isn't done here. There's so much more to the story, including local ties to Spokane. Now, what I didn't mention yet is that George was held in Spokane for 5 of the 7 days he was kidnapped. The closet he was in is still intact, and we had the chance to see what it looks like 86 years later.
Well, you can't really see it, but you can feel that. Well, here you can see it kind of moving. You can see it's not attached, and it's like that all throughout the whole closet.
Tomorrow on Up with Krem, we show you where George was held captive and take a closer look at the people who held him there.